Hello, I'm John Nagowski. Today I will be talking about disaster management in the Dominican Republic. Overall, today I'd like to outline the history behind disaster management, and specifically in the Dominican Republic, some of the legal framework of the country's implementation pattern, obstacles to successful disaster management, and participants in the country's disaster management strategy, including government and internal government agencies. So, some of the history behind disaster management: Hurricane George is a key moment in the Dominican Republic's disaster management history. This hurricane happened in 1998. The event is more known for the government recognizing their need for risk reduction rather than their response to it. Needless to say, it wasn't great. It caused 300 deaths. Several infrastructures were completely lost, and obviously huge agricultural losses as well. Some of the data after the hurricane shows the country's need for building regulations, food storages, and water storages, especially when it comes to electricity and the power grid specifically. Some of the legal framework establishing the implementation pattern is the Disaster Risk Management Act. This was implemented in 2002. The implementation pattern established a bottom-up pattern, which means the response begins at the local level. The framework is defined by 26 national laws, and these laws address prevention, mitigation, and specifically the response to that disaster. Disasters in the Dominican Republic that they're prone to are obviously hurricanes, floods, droughts, and landslides. Although the largest causes for concern are centered around water, the Dominican is also at risk for earthquakes as well. Earthquakes pose a serious issue because the country is located on two fault lines. The two fault lines are the left lateral North American plate and the Caribbean plate. So, because of the nature of these risks, there are two important institutions needed to reduce the risks. These two are the EOC, the National Meteorological Office, and the Dominican Institute of Hydraulic Resources. There are many different types of obstacles to successful disaster management. Some of the obstacles that are presented, especially in the Dominican specifically, overcrowding in the cities due to lack of space and poor terrain, poor building codes and regulation, poor sanitation and sewage, and racial disparities are huge. Obviously, in the Dominican, there's a low socioeconomic ratio, and with this comes the need for disaster management because of these various types of vulnerabilities are occurred into by the poor. Participants in the country's disaster management are important for disaster response. There are many participants in the Dominican Republic's disaster management, which include government agencies, intergovernmental agencies as well. The Office of Disaster Management, the Emergency Operations Center. We have the National Office for Systemic Assessment and Vulnerability of Infrastructure and Buildings. That's obviously relating to the earthquakes. One key intergovernmental agency is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. This obviously deals with mostly hurricanes. We also see some floods and some earthquakes as well within this specific agency. That's my presentation. Thank you very much. Be happy to answer any questions.